The history of Poland during the Piast dynasty is the first major stage in the history of Poland. The Piast period lasted from the 10th through the 14th century, when Poland was established as a state and a nation during the Middle Ages of European history. The history of Poland commences with the founding of the Piast dynasty and the rule of the proper founder of the Polish state, Mieszko I. From around 960 AD, the indigenous Piast ruling house was largely responsible for the formation of the state and remained in power until 1370. Mieszko chose to be baptized in the Western Latin Rite in 966, which established a major cultural boundary in Europe. He completed the unification of the West Slavic tribal lands, fundamental to the existence of the new country of Poland. Following the emergence of the Polish state, a series of rulers converted the population to Christianity, created a strong kingdom and integrated Poland into the European culture. Mieszko's son, Boleslaw I, established a Polish church province, pursued territorial conquests and was officially crowned in 1025, becoming the first king of Poland. The first Piast monarchy collapsed with the death of Mieszko II Lambert in 1034, followed by its restoration under Casimir I. Casimir's son, Boleslaw II the Bold, brought back the military assertiveness of Boleslaw I, but became fatally involved in a conflict with Bishop Stanislaus of Szczepin and was expelled from the country. Boleslaw III, the last duke of the early period, succeeded in defending his country and recovering territories previously lost. Upon his death in 1138, Poland was divided among his sons. The resulting internal fragmentation eroded the initial Piast monarchy structure in the 12th and 13th centuries and caused fundamental and lasting changes. Conrad I of Asovia invited the Teutonic Knights to help him fight the Baltic Prussian pagans, which led to centuries of Poland's warfare with the Knights and the German-Prussian state. The kingdom was restored under Władysław I the Elbow High, then strengthened and expanded by his son Casimir III the Great. The western provinces of Silesia and Pomerania were lost after the fragmentation, and Poland began expanding to the east. The period ended with the reigns of two members of the Angevin dynasty. The consolidation in the 14th century laid the base for the new powerful kingdom of Poland that was to follow. 10th–12th century, Mieszko I adoption of Christianity. The tribe of the Polans of what is now Greater Poland gave rise to a tribal predecessor of the Polish state in the early part of the 10th century, with the Polans settling in the flatlands around the emerging strongholds of Giecz, Poznan, Gniezno and Ostrołęki. Accelerated rebuilding of old tribal fortified settlements, construction of massive new ones and territorial expansion took place during 920 to 950. The process continued and the Polish state developed from tribal roots in the second half of the century. According to the chronicler Gallus Anonymous, the Polans were ruled by the Piast dynasty. In existing sources, Piast ruler Mieszko I was first mentioned by Widukind of Corvey in his Res Gestae Saxonici, a chronicle of 10th century Germany. Widukind reported that Mieszko's forces were twice defeated in 963 by the Veleti tribes acting in cooperation with the Saxon exile Wichman the Younger. Under Mieszko's rule, his tribal state accepted Christianity and became the Polish state. The viability of the emerging state was assured by the persistent territorial expansion of the early Piast rulers. Beginning with a very small area around Gniezno, the Piast expansion lasted throughout most of the 10th century, resulting in a territory approximating that of present-day Poland. Poland. The Polani tribe conquered and merged with other Slavic tribes and formed a tribal federation, and later, a centralized state. After the addition of Lesser Poland, the country of the Vistulans, and of Silesia, Mieszko's state reached its mature form, including the main regions regarded as ethnically Polish. The Piast lands totaled about 250,000 square kilometers in area, with an approximate population of under 1 million. Initially a pagan, Mieszko I was the first ruler of the Poland's tribal union known from contemporary written sources. A detailed account of aspects of Mieszko's early reign was given by Ibrahim ibn Yaqub, a Jewish traveler, according to whom Mieszko was one of 4 Slavic kings established in Central and Southern Europe in the 960s. In 965, Mieszko, who was allied with Boleslaw I, Duke of Bohemia at the time, married the Duke's daughter, a Christian princess. Mieszko's conversion to Christianity in its Western Latin Rite followed on the 14th of April 966, and is considered to be the founding event of the Polish state. In the aftermath of Mieszko's 967 victory over a force of the Wielędzani, which was led by Wichman, the first missionary bishop was appointed. The action counteracted the intended eastern expansion of the Magdeburg Archdiocese, established at about the same time. Mieszko's state had a complex political relationship with the German Holy Roman Empire, as Mieszko was a friend, ally and vassal of Otto I, paying him tribute from the western part of his lands. It fought wars with the Palabian Slavs, the Margraves of the Saxon Eastern March, and the Czechs. The victories over Wichman and Hodo allowed Mieszko to extend his Pomeranian possessions west to the vicinity of the Oder River and its mouth. After the death of Otto I, and then again after the death of Otto II, Mieszko supported Henry the Quarrelsome, a pretender to the imperial crown. After the death of Dobrowa, Mieszko married California. 980 a German, Oda von Haldensleben, daughter of Dietrich Margrave of the Northern March. When fighting the Czechs in 990, Mieszko was helped by the Holy Roman Empire. By about the year 990, when Mieszko I officially submitted his country to the authority of the Holy See, he had transformed Poland into one of the strongest powers in Central Eastern Europe. Boleslaw I, Church Province Conquests, Kingdom of Poland. Mieszko I died in 992. Contrary to what the first ruler of Poland had intended, when Oda with her minor sons lost the power struggle, Boleslaw, Mieszko's oldest son, became the sole ruler of Poland. A man of high ambition and strong personality, Boleslaw embarked on further territorial expansion to the west, south, and east. While often successful, the campaigns and the gains turned out to be of only passing significance and badly strained the resources of the young nation. Boleslaw lost the economically crucial Father Pomerania. Together with its new bishopric in Kołobrzeg, the region had previously been conquered with great effort by Mieszko. Boleslaw Chrobry began his reign by continuing his father's policy of alliance with the Holy Roman Empire. Boleslaw received and helped Wojciech of the Slavnik family, a well-connected Czech bishop in exile and missionary who was killed in 997 while on a mission in Prussia. Boleslaw skillfully took advantage of Wojciech's death. The martyrdom of Wojciech gave Poland a patron saint, Street, Adalbert, and resulted in the creation of an independent Polish province of the Church with an archbishop in Gniezno. In the year 1000, the young Emperor Otto III came as a pilgrim to visit Street, Adalbert's grave, and lent his support to Boleslaw during the Congress of Gniezno. The Gniezno Archdiocese and several subordinate dioceses were Established on this occasion, the Polish ecclesiastical province effectively served as an essential anchor and an institution to fall back on for the Piast state, helping it to survive in the troubled centuries ahead. Otto died in 1002, and Boleslaw's relationship with his successor Henry II turned out to be much more difficult, resulting in a series of wars. From 1003 to 1004, Boleslaw intervened militarily in Czech dynastic conflicts. After his forces were removed from Bohemia in 1018, Boleslaw retained Moravia. In 1013, the marriage between Boleslaw's son Mieszko and Richeza of Lotharingia, the niece of Emperor Otto III and future mother of Casimir I the Restorer, took place. The conflicts with Germany ended in 1018 with the Peace of Bad Zinaccord, on favorable terms for Boleslaw. In the context of the 1018 Kiev expedition, Boleslaw took over the western part of Red Ruthenia. In 1025, shortly before his death, Boleslaw I the Brave finally succeeded in obtaining the papal permission to crown himself, and became the first king of Poland. Mieszko II. Collapse of the reign. King Mieszko II Lambert tried to continue the politics of his father, using Boleslaw's kingdom as an interventionist great power. Mieszko's actions reinforced old resentment and hostility on the part of Poland's neighbors, and his two dispossessed brothers took advantage of it, arranging for Rus and German invasions. In 1031, Mieszko was defeated and was forced to leave the country. Later, Mieszko's brothers Bezprym and Otto were killed and Mieszko partially recovered. The first Piast monarchy collapsed with Mieszko's death in 1034. Deprived of a government, Poland was ravaged by an anti-feudal and pagan rebellion, and in 1039 by the forces of Boleslaw I of Bohemia. The country suffered territorial losses, and the functioning of the Gniezno archdiocese was disrupted. Restoration under Casimir I. The nation made a recovery under Mieszko's son, Duke Casimir I, properly known as the Restorer. After returning from exile in 1039, Casimir rebuilt the Polish monarchy and the country's territorial integrity through several military campaigns. In 1047, Masovia was taken back from Miklaw, and in 1054 Silesia from the Czechs. Casimir was aided by the recent adversaries of Poland, the Holy Roman Empire and Kievan Rus, both of whom disliked the chaos in Poland. Casimir introduced a more mature form of feudalism and relieved the burden of financing large army units from the duke's treasury by settling his warriors on feudal estates. Faced with the widespread destruction of Greater Poland after the Czech expedition, Casimir moved his court to Kraków, replacing the old Piast capitals of Poznan and Gniezno. Kraków functioned as the nation's capital for several centuries. Boleslaw II, conflict with Bishop Stanislaw Casimir's son Boleslaw II the Bold, also known as the Generous, developed Polish military strength and waged several foreign campaigns between 1058 and 1077. As an active supporter of the papal side in its feud with the German emperor, Boleslaw crowned himself king in 1076 with the blessing of Pope Gregory VII. In 1079 there was an anti-Boleslaw conspiracy conflict that involved the Bishop of Kraków. Boleslaw had Bishop Stanislaus of Szczytna executed. Subsequently, Boleslaw was forced to abdicate the Polish throne because of the pressure from the Catholic Church and the pro-imperial faction of the nobility. St. Stanislaus was to become the second martyr and patron saint of Poland, canonized in 1253. Władysław I Herman. After Boleslaw's exile, the country found itself under the unstable rule of his younger brother Władysław I Herman. Władysław was strongly dependent on Palatine Sieciek, when Władysław's two sons, Zbigniew and Boleslaw, finally forced Władysław to remove his hated protege. Poland was divided among the three of them from 1098, and after the father's death from 1102 to 1106 between the two brothers, Boleslaw III. After a power struggle, Boleslaw III the Wry-mouthed became the Duke of Poland by defeating his half-brother in 1106 to 1107. Zbigniew had to leave the country, but received support from Emperor Henry V, who attacked Boleslaw's Poland in 1109. Boleslaw was able to defend his country because of his military abilities, determination and alliances, and also because of a national mobilization across the social spectrum. Zbigniew, who later returned, was eliminated. Boleslaw's other major achievement was the conquest of all of Mieszko I's Pomerania, a task begun by his father and completed by Boleslaw around 1123. Szczecin was subdued in a bloody takeover in western Pomerania up to Rügen, except for the directly incorporated southern part, became Boleslaw's fief, to be ruled locally by Władysław I, the first Duke of the Griffin dynasty. At this time, Christianization of the region was initiated in earnest, an effort crowned by the establishment of the Pomeranian Wolan diocese after Boleslaw's death in 1140. Fragmentation of the realm before he died. Boleslaw Królewski divided the country, in a limited sense, among four of his sons. He made complexer arrangements intended to prevent fratricidal warfare and preserve the Polish state's formal unity. But after Boleslaw's death the plan's implementation had failed, and in reality a long period of fragmentation was ushered in. For nearly 2 centuries the Piasts were to spar with each other, the clergy and the nobility, for the control over the divided kingdom. The stability of the system was supposedly assured by the institution of the senior High Duke of Poland, based in Krakow and assigned to the special seniorate province that was not to be subdivided. Following his concept of seniorate, Boleslaw divided the country into 5 principalities: Silesia, Greater Poland, Masovia, Sandomierz and Kraków. The first 4 provinces were given to his 4 sons, who became independent rulers. The 5th province, the seniorate province of Kraków, was to be added to the senior among the princes who, as the Grand Duke of Kraków, was the representative of the whole of Poland. This principle broke down already within the generation of Boleslaw II's sons, when Władysław II the Exile, Boleslaw IV the Curly, Mieszko III the Old and Casimir II the Just fought for power and territory in Poland, and in particular over the Kraków throne. The external borders left by Boleslaw III at his death closely resembled the borders left by Mieszko I. This original early Piast monarchy configuration had not survived the fragmentation period. Culture from the time of the baptism of Poland's ruling elite. Foreign churchmen had been arriving, and the culture of early medieval Poland was developing as a part of European Christendom. However, it would be a few generations from the time of Mieszko's conversion until significant numbers of native clergymen appeared. After the establishment of numerous monasteries in the 12th and 13th centuries, Christianization of the populace was accomplished on a larger scale. Intellectual and artistic activity was concentrated around the institutions of the church, the courts of the kings and dukes, and emerged around the households of the rising hereditary elite. Written annals began to be generated in the late 10th century. Leaders like Mieszko II and Casimir the Restorer were considered literate and educated, along with the Exact. The most important written document and source of the period is the Gesta Principal Epistlum Paulinorum, a chronicle by Gallus Anonymous, a foreign cleric from the court of Boleslaw the Wry Mouths. A number of pre-Romanesque stone churches were built beginning in the 10th century, often accompanied by palatium ruler residencies. Romanesque buildings proper followed. The earliest coins were minted by Boleslaw I around 995. The Gniezno doors of Gniezno Cathedral are the finest example of Romanesque sculpture. Bruno of Querfurt was one of the pioneering Western clergymen spreading church literacy. Some of his prominent writings had been produced in eremitic monasteries in Poland. Among the preeminent early monastic religious orders were the Benedictines and the Cistercians, 13th century. State and society. German settlement. The 13th century brought fundamental changes to the structure of Polish society and its political system. Because of the fragmentation and constant internal conflicts, the Piast dukes were unable to stabilize Poland's external borders of the early Piast rulers. West and Farther Pomerania broke its political ties with Poland in the second half of the 12th century and from 1231 became a fief of the Margraviate of Brandenburg, which in 1307 extended its Pomeranian possessions even further east, taking over the Slorno and Slusk areas. Pomerelia Gdansk. Pomerania had been independent of the Polish dukes from 1227. In mid-13th century, Boleslaw II to the Bald granted Lubus land to the Margraviate, which made possible the creation of the Neumark and had far-reaching negative consequences for the integrity of the western border. In the southeast, Leszek the White was unable to preserve Poland's supremacy over the Halych area of Rus, a territory that had changed hands on a number of occasions. The social status was becoming increasingly based on the size of feudal land possessions. Those included the lands controlled by the Piast princes, their rivals the great lay landowners and church entities, all the way down to the knightly class. The workforce ranged from hired free people, through serfs attached to the land, to slaves. The upper layer of the feudal lords, first the church and then others, were able to acquire economic and legal immunity, which made them exempt to a significant degree from court jurisdiction or economical obligations that had previously been imposed by the ruling dukes. The civil strife and foreign invasions, such as the Mongol invasions in 1240, 1241, 1259, 1260 and 1287, 1288, weakened and depopulated the many small Polish principalities as the country was becoming progressively more subdivided. The depopulation and the increasing demand for labor in the developing economy caused a massive immigration of West European peasants, mostly German settlers, into Poland. The German, Polish and other new rural settlements were a form of feudal tenancy with immunity, and German town laws were often utilized as its legal basis. German immigrants were also important in the rise of the cities and the establishment of the Polish burgher class. They brought with them West European laws and customs which the Poles adopted. For that time the Germans, who created early strong establishments especially in the urban centers of Silesia and other regions of western Poland, had been an increasingly influential minority in Poland. In 1228, the Acts of Siena were passed and signed into law by Władysław III Laskonogi. The titular Duke of Poland promised to provide a just and noble law according to the Council of Bishops and Barons. Such legal guarantees and privileges included the lower-level landowners, knights, who were evolving into the lower and middle nobility class known later as Szlachta. The fragmentation period weakened the rulers and established a permanent trend in Polish history. whereby the rights and role of the nobility were expanded at the monarch's expense. Teutonic Knights. In 1226, Conrad I of Masovia invited the Teutonic Knights to help him fight the pagan Baltic Prussian people, who lived in a territory adjacent to his lands. Substantial border warfare was taking place and Conrad's province was suffering from Prussian invasions. On the other hand, the Old Prussians themselves were at the time being subjected to increasingly forced, but largely ineffective Christianization efforts. The Teutonic Order soon overstepped the authority and moved beyond the area granted them by Conrad. In the following decades they conquered large areas along the Baltic seacoast and established the monastic state. As virtually all of the Western Baltic pagans became converted or exterminated, the Knights confronted Poland and Lithuania, then the last pagan state in Europe. Teutonic wars with Poland and Lithuania continued for most of the 14th and 15th centuries. The Teutonic state in Prussia, populated by German settlers beginning in the 13th century, had been claimed as a fief and protected by the popes and Holy Roman emperors. Reunification attempts, Przemysl II, Wacław II. As the disadvantages of national division were becoming increasingly apparent in various segments of the society, some of the Piast dukes had begun making serious efforts aimed at the reunification of the Polish state. Important among the earlier attempts were the activities of the Silesian dukes Henry I the Bearded, his son Henry II the Pious, who was killed in 1241 while fighting the Mongols at the Battle of Legnica, and Henry IV Probus. In 1295 Przemysl II of Greater Poland became the first, since Boleslaw II, Piast Duke, crowned as King of Poland, but he ruled over only a part of the territory of Poland and was assassinated soon after his coronation. A more extensive unification of Polish lands was accomplished by a foreign ruler, Wacław II of Bohemia of the Przemysl dynasty, who married Przemysl's daughter and became King of Poland in 1300. Wacław's heavy-handed policies soon caused him to lose whatever support he had. Earlier in his reign, he died in 1305. An important factor in the unification process was the Polish Church, which remained a single ecclesiastical province throughout the Fragmentation period. Archbishop Jakub Winka of Gniezno was an ardent proponent of Poland's reunification. He performed the crowning ceremonies for both Przemysl II and Wenceslaus II. Winka supported Władysław Łokietek at various stages of the Duke's career. Culturally, the social impact of the Church was considerably broader in the 13th century, as networks of parishes were established and cathedral-type schools became more common. The Dominicans and the Franciscans were the leading monastic orders at this time, and they interacted closely with the general population. A proliferation of narrative annals characterized the period, as well as other written records, laws and documents. More of the clergy were of local origin, others were expected to know the Polish language. Wincenty Kadlubek, the author of an influential chronicle, was the most recognized representative in the intellectual sphere. Perspectiva, a treatise on optics by Witello, a Silesian monk, was one of the finest achievements of medieval science. The construction of churches and castles in the Gothic architecture style predominated in the 13th century. Native elements in art forms were increasingly important, with significant advances taking place in agriculture, manufacturing and crafts.